What is up, guys? This is All the Smoke on Strength and Physique with your hosts Adam and Chris, where we provide you with evidence-based information, community support, and recognition to all who are bettering themselves with fitness. On this episode, we talk pain and pleasure with All the Smoke on Strength and Physique and evidence-based movement.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Make sure you put that on the podcast.
We got
right.
greatness right here.
We'll throw that one on there too. All right, Adam, go ahead and introduce them.
I don't need to introduce it. Go ahead. So we got two great people from a great platform, evidence-based movement. I've known these guys for almost 5 years now? Seems crazy.
Where'd you meet them?
Yeah. I'll let them do the talking. So I'll start with Eric, man. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
So I'm Eric Schindler. I'm from Tampa, Florida. I said I'm help out with evidence-based movement. I'm currently a doctor of physical therapy in the Tampa area. I started out as a college baseball player turned PT / NARP, non-athletic regular person as of lately. But I kind of help for 22 years, basically played baseball like every single day of my life. And something I kind of stumbled along the way was some injuries. My twin brother had some injuries, and that's kind of how I got into physical therapy, like whole sports medicine side of things. I was always interested in it, and then that kind of led me down to essentially seeking it as a career, and that's what's led me to the pinnacle of my career, which is being on this podcast.
Hey, shout out to those people listening to this. We got 2-3 listeners. Not many people know about this. All right, man. Chris, go ahead. Introduce yourself. This is the goal for anybody that doesn't.
I'm Chris Guy. I'm also a doctor of physical therapy. I'm one of the founders and head content creators for EBM. Physical therapy for me was like the easiest job I could ever go into. Going into college, I knew I wanted to be somewhere in the health sciences field. And so my sister was a speech pathologist. I was like, yeah, that sounds fun. So that was my initial major, was speech pathology. And then I actually shadowed one, and it was like the absolute longest day of my life. Like, it was a bunch of kids who just wouldn't talk. And I was like, man, they just look really shy, or maybe they're on the spectrum, but like clearly I didn't have the patience for that, I guess. The cat. Sorry if anyone's not on the video. Eric's beautiful cat just passed by. But the very next day I shadowed a physical therapist, and literally as soon as I walked in the door, I saw it wasn't even like nothing crazy of a clinic. It wasn't like, barbells and weights and stuff like that. But I saw 5-pound weights and things. I'm like, oh my, this is amazing. This is perfect. And 3 years later, I found out it wasn't even a physical therapist I was shadowing. It was a occupational therapist. But either way, I just walked into the environment and I was like, oh, this is it. I'm sold. So a little more before all that, I went to USF for both undergrad and grad school, co-founded the powerlifting team at USF and still do some coaching with all of that. And then also got a lot involved in the research, the same lab that Adam was in, and got to publish a couple studies and then run one of my own studies where we made people squat and deadlift 6 days a week. And one of those studies, Eric broke his back, but that wasn't my study, so it was okay.
Nice. So yeah,
I still think to this day I'm the first and only person to get hurt in a USF exercise science study.
Yeah, so far.
Campbell would always brag about that. Nobody's gotten hurt except one person. He would always say. So now I know it's you.
Now I know it's you too.
Yeah,
I'm like.
I got a call from him at 7-8 o'clock one night, and he was just making sure I was okay.
Yeah,
oh, man.
It was day one. And what's funny is 3 days before Eric hurt himself, Eric also took a walk with 425 for his first deadlift, heavy deadlift, and lost his balance and literally walked with it 3 or 4 steps. So he was just it was waiting to happen.
More impressive than anything.
Yeah, but I think Eric got a great lesson about how low back pain isn't necessarily debilitating, even though he literally couldn't walk after.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Yeah, so I guess that could be a good segue with, maybe movement or exercise selection causing pain. So obviously, right, I think a lot of individuals, if they deadlifted whatever amount of weight and they got hurt, I think their mindset is now stuck into that, oh, I can't deadlift, I'm going to get hurt. What are your guys' general thoughts on, are exercises bad, or is it, hey, maybe you're just not ready or for a specific movement? What is your kind of way to approach either a patient or a client in that aspect? Eric, you can go ahead and go first if you want.
I mean, you kind of put that one on a tee for us. But no, I think you're basically kind of answered the question by stating it. Just personally, I don't feel that there's a lot of bad exercises or bad movements. It's just, I guess you'd say, one we're not ready for. And yeah, that was essentially, I may have deadlifted like once or twice in my life, like literally I can count on one hand, but I went into this study and I was about to deadlift 3 times a week, which probably may not be the best thing ever. Try to max out and then try to deadlift 2 to 3 times a week for the first time ever. But you can kind of see I physically was not prepared for it. That's something we kind of we fight clients on, patients on. I don't want to say fight them, but so we have to kind of talk them through and make them realize, hey, maybe what you were doing wasn't necessarily bad. You just really weren't ready for it.
Yeah, and even for Eric, I remember like going into the study, he told me like, yeah, I've done like 225 for sets of 5 before. And then he maxed out around like 420, 425. And then his first day, he had 3 sets of 8 with 300. So going from 225 for a couple sets of 8, and it was his very last rep on his very last set of 300 for a 3x8. And like his butt was just shooting up in the air and he was all over the place. To me, yeah, that is the expected outcome. But at the same time, it's very possible Eric 4 years ago wouldn't have even hurt himself doing that, right? Because, even though there is the perspective of load and like loading before you're even ready for it, or moving or performing a movement that you're not 100% ready for, there's also just a million other factors that are involved in injuries. And so Eric was in PT school at the time. Eric, who knows what his sleep was like and everything, as opposed to when he was an athlete. He probably could have just jumped into something like that, went at it, had just the most disgusting reps ever and survived it. And he probably could have continued to progress on like that. There's no way to really know. But a lot of it is, discussing with patients just how complicated this stuff is, but then also leaving them with the answer that, but addressing it's pretty simple. And I think the simplicity of it all is where we try to kind of guide our patients through everything. Just like what Adam was talking about. You could ball, 5 hours a day, wake up the next morning, not eat anything, maybe have like a bowl of cereal and then go back at it again. Things are definitely different, and that's a part of what we do. And educating them on how to be a little smarter as you get older is a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. You feel like you're a superhuman when you're a teenager or whatever. So like, even with all of that, what are some of the things you try to educate your patients on when it comes to, coming back smarter, or even just, is there any type of other exercise that you would implement before maybe putting somebody right back on a deadlift or a squat for that matter?
Yeah, for me, let's say it's like an acute low back pain patient, which to me, that's my knock out of the park, set them up really early, try to make it very successful. And to me, that's a big part of managing them, is letting them know that, hey, 80% of people with an acute incident of low back pain are going to be perfectly fine and better 100% within the next 4 to 12 weeks. And that's without me even touching you. Letting them know that the research shows they have a very favorable prognosis. So we can set them up that, hey, you don't even need me to feel better. But then letting them know, but there's still a lot of value in seeing me. And we can work through, any fears you might have or whatever beliefs you might have, and moving along the way as we kind of create this relationship together and figure out what it is that they need. So typically it's, let's say it's that acute onset low back pain and they're a little flexion intolerant, right? When they try to bend down, they feel a little bit of tightness or pain, whatever it might be. A lot of my narrative is based off of, hey, okay, there's a specific position that you can't tolerate right now. So we're going to do some things to expand that range of motion and expand what you can tolerate. And then we're also going to progressively layer you up and load you up I like to give examples of, having a ceiling for what they're capable of doing, and that sometimes they might touch above that ceiling, whether that might be, the load that they're lifting or the position that they're in with the load, or just how long they're doing something. And let them know that our goal is to bump your ceiling up slowly over time, and really set that expectation that even when you're done here, I want you to continue with these things. And like, to me, therapy isn't about like, oh, I'm going to fix you and then you're going to be done. It's more so, hey, this is how I want you to approach the problem, and then I want you to be able to handle this on your own if it does ever happen again. Because at the same time, the most predicting factor for a low back injury is a previous low back injury. So to me, it's a lot about setting the expectations and then almost letting the exercise do the talking, essentially, right? Let them see like, oh yeah, this is heavier, or I'm in this position now. And last week I couldn't handle that and I couldn't figure that out. Yeah.
No, I'll kind of like touch on that. I had a case either Thursday or Friday this past week. He's 31. He's a firefighter. I mean, he played high school soccer. He's pretty athletic growing up. And I kind of like anything. I think you don't think you're as far removed from things as you are. In the grand scheme of things, like it's been, 6 months, years till like people, when they're physically active, they're working out, playing sports. And he's had some back pain issues over the last, 3-4 months. But I'm a student right now, so I find myself kind of explaining my thought process a little more. And I kind of told the same thing, like, hey, you're a firefighter, you're carrying, there's a job requirement to be able to lift 150 pounds by himself. I mean, they're moving like, let's say, bigger people all day. It's like that's a majority of the firefighters' calls is going to field houses and having to lift people. But I say, essentially, man, you're an athlete to me. Like your job demands are a lot. And like you said, trying to build that ceiling, I'll straight up tell them like, hey, look, we're trying to build the capacity and try to build the strength. So like when you get back to work, it's going to be easy. And some of the stuff we're going to do in here is going to help build those muscles, build those patterns that you need to be able to do when you get back to work. And I think most of the time we explain it that way. They're like, okay, it's pretty simple. And I feel like sometimes people are looking for this big, complicated answer about their disc or their SI joint or their pelvis or something. But I mean, like Chris and we've had this conversation plenty of times, but we don't have an SI joint exercise, or we don't have a disc exercise. Like I'm basically looking at what he has to do, what he currently can do, and I try to get them up to that level. And I'll straight up tell them that. I mean, right now you're able to do this. You need to be able to do this. This is how we're going to get there.
Yeah, I would definitely say I'm in like this similar idea of like, see what they can functionally do and ask them about, what they've heard, what their expectations are. What has your doctor told you about this? That way, if there are things that we might need to address, and it's not about like, oh, let's throw the doctor on the rug, but more so, okay, this is what you've heard. I will tell you from like my professional standpoint, I'm not really going to change what I do based off of your diagnosis per se, right? Whether it's a rotator cuff tear or shoulder impingement or whatever it is, I just care, can you, reach up and grab that plate from the top of your shelf? And if you can't, how do we get there? And same thing that when Eric was talking about, like, essentially raising their capacity above what their everyday or what their work demands are. Like my absolute favorite thing to do is to load someone on like a trap bar deadlift, especially like my, 50-plus-year-old mothers who, have, stopped exercising after COVID, and they've been having these like nagging, aching pains, having them pull like, even if it's just like 70, 80 pounds, which to me and to us, that's probably not a huge deal, but then they'll do it for like a set of 5, and I'll tell them like, hey, guess how much weight that is? And you tell them it's 95 pounds and they are like floored. Like there's no way I just picked up close to 100 pounds. And to me, that can also be pretty powerful to show that, okay, we know how to pick up 100 pounds. Maybe next time you try to pick up your couch with your husband, it won't be such a huge deal for you, and you will be prepared, and just setting them up for that.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you guys do is, my bad, Eric, go ahead.
Like what Chris was saying, I don't know if you guys deal with this with clients, but I guess people who are hurt might be a little more like shy away from loading or scared because they're afraid to get hurt. There's people all the time that we deal with, like they flat out do not want to lift any more weight. They're almost like they get afraid to. So we have like a cable stack, and say they're having to do rows. I can tell that like they're doing 4 sets of 15, and it's like easy. Like it's the point where like that cable doesn't even have any tension on it. I'll like, without them even knowing, on say they come in Monday, on Wednesday, I'll go ahead and throw up like move it 10 pounds on them, and like not deceiving them in like a hurtful way, but I'll say, hey, by the way, you just did like, you did 5 more reps for the same amount of sets with 10 more pounds today, and kind of showing them like, oh wow, and it's like this light bulb. They kind of like, oh wow, like I actually am a little stronger than I thought so.
I think that's an important concept just for clients in general. That's something I experience all the time is people, obviously for muscle growth, that's the big thing I focus on, is just an individual coach, not as like rehab or anything, but I'll have clients that are not wanting to push themselves to the point where they need to because it's hard. And the bar velocity is just way too fast for how difficult they're saying it is. They're saying it's a 9 out of 10. And I'm explaining that means you only have 1 rep left, but they're moving the bar just as fast as their first rep, or very close. Obviously I can't see the difference, but yeah, Eric, you brought up a perfect example. Is just adding 10 pounds or 15 pounds the following session, because 15 pounds on a 100-pound squat, if they're moving the bar super fast, then voila, you surprise them, be like, hey, you increased the weight this much, and last week you said you couldn't do any more weight. They're like, wow, you're right. So that's extremely, extremely important.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, what you guys are saying, it's trying to get them to almost buy into that product of what you're trying to produce and get them to where you want them to be. And sometimes they can be their own worst enemy, especially when you've had that experience. So kind of, do you guys have any stories that you might have with one of those patients or clients that we all possibly have that just fight you to the T and say, I'm not doing this, or, hey, I'm not progressing, or something that possibly happens like, hey, they feel really good one day and then they come to see you the next day and they're back at point 1. And then you're just kind of having to explain, right, the pain science of, hey, it's not going to always be perfect. Could you guys walk us through a scenario of that way?
Well, I have an example of like just why the setup is important as well as the delivery, but ultimately like the patient's preferences or the client's preferences are where that's going to be above anything else. I had a guy who he had like a minor lumbar surgery 10 years ago, completely fixed his back, felt great, threw his back out again, comes to see me for physical therapy after being referred by his doctor. And like, even from the very beginning, it was pretty much, he just didn't want to be there. And so I had a student at the time, and initially the student was doing the eval, and like, as I saw this guy was like not receptive at all, I was just kind of slowly trying to take the reins. And pretty much the entire eval turned into just discussing with him, hey, this is what you can't do. This is where I can help you. The guy is a farmer. And so it's not a matter of like, he's not performing enough activity. Like, he's lifting 50, 60 plus pound bales of hay all day long. And I was explaining to him that, yeah, you are correct. If I load you up even more in here and get you to the point where you can no longer do what you need to do for your farm, yeah, I wouldn't want to go through physical therapy either. And essentially the entire time he's fighting me with why he doesn't need physical therapy, and he didn't even really know why he was there in the first place. So I explained to him what physical therapy would look like and what what I would want him to do. But at the same time, I told him at the end of the day, like, his goals are what matter to him. At the time, he was able to do everything he needed for farming. He had to deal with a little bit of nagging back pain, but he said to him, it felt like he essentially had so much gas in his tank every day, and he would always run it dry and then wake up the next day and do it again. I explained to him how we can try to increase that tank or go over strategies to improve, how he does things. But at the end of the day, like, we were both well aware he wasn't going to come back for physical therapy. He wasn't going to follow up with it. And he even flat out told me, like, hey, it actually ended up being a really good conversation. He appreciated me taking the time to explain it to him. But at the end of the day, if he's not going to, commit to this, I'm not going to, putz around and give him some like BS, like, oh, here's some like exercises that work these small muscles that you're probably not working when you lift. Like, no, this guy's lifting heavy amounts of weight. He moved great. My ideal goal for him would have been to build up his capacity and be stronger and be able to tolerate it more. So I kind of left it at that of, hey, if you ever need anything, this is where I am. If your symptoms do flare up again, I'd be more than happy to walk you through it. But at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to try to force this guy through anything that he's not prepared for. So, it's not like this beautiful success story where we became best friends at the end, but I think it's a good example of why we need to listen to what the patient says and respect what they say. And at the same time, respect that this guy does everything he needs to complete his job for farming. He had a little exacerbation in his back pain that resolved on its own. He thinks one day he'll need a surgery again. I told him why I think otherwise and tried to convince him, on a financial standpoint of why he might benefit from coming back to therapy if he does have a, big exacerbation, but kind of left it at that. But Eric, hopefully you have a better story that answers Adam's question.
Well, I was kind of like touching on what you're saying. I remember we get some pain management patients, and that's a pain management doctor. They're chronic pain. Some like these are the stereotypical, like a stereotypical case, like a bad stereotypical case would be someone who's basically like they're drug seeking and they go to chronic pain and they're trying to get opioids, which it happens a lot. But I remember as a student, I was with my clinical instructor at the time, who's not my boss, but we had this lady come in and she's told us in the past how she did construction. She loved like lift, like to be a hands-on job. But you could see quickly, like how Chris saying, she was not coming back. She was very like combative, like, well, like, hey, if you do want to ever get back to those things, this is your first step. Like, we can help you with that. And long story short, she wasn't having it. And my boss basically asked her to leave halfway through because she was just didn't want to be there. Like, to the point where it was like rudely didn't want to be there. So, okay, well, I think we're done here today. Like, it was nice meeting you, and like, you take care. But that happens. That's like the worst case scenario. But I feel like you have to meet people where they're at. Like that guy, Chris, did that. He didn't try to oversell anything. I mean, Chris, he pleaded his case for why the guy needed PT, but he wasn't trying to beat him over the head with, oh, movement is medicine and motion is lotion and we need to get you better, and trying to sound snake oil here. But if you can meet them where they're at, then I think, and if you can get them to at least start with you, then maybe you can slowly help like change those beliefs into a positive way.
Yeah, and to answer kind of more so what Adam was asking about, like when they do have that relapse, or they're feeling great, they're hyped up, they're ready to go, and then the next day they're like, oh my gosh, it felt like you absolutely destroyed me. I think a lot of that also comes to setting the expectation early on that, hey, this is what I expect you to respond like. I expect that the next 24 hours your symptoms might even feel a little bit worse, or we may not be able to tolerate as much, and then another 24 hours will go by, and I expect that you should be back down to that baseline, if not even a little bit better. And if it lasts longer than those 48 hours that I just explained, then okay, we need to adjust something. We need to change our dose. I like to try to discuss exercise in terms of dosing as much as possible. And at the same time, also give them the awareness, that stress includes all factors of stress. It's not just the stress from exercise, but also life stress and all that. And I try to, set this expectation, and in the best case scenario, yes, they are a little more sore the next day, and maybe they can't tolerate as much as they could, just like I told them I expected to happen. And then they come back that next day and it felt even better than it did before, or it felt like it went back to that baseline. And to me, it's already set them up for what to expect. Now it shows that, oh, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. And at the same time, if we do hit that like 48-hour rule that I like to try to set with them, and it is significantly worse for those 48 hours, I also tell them that, hey, it's not that we haven't done any major damage that has set you back down to like absolute can't even get out of your own bed again, which is good. That tells me, hey, we can even stress your tissues a little more than what they can even tolerate, and you're still okay. We'll adapt things on our end, and we'll talk about what changes we can make to make sure we don't have this response, and then try to build back up from there. But like end of the day, I feel like setting your expectations from day one, as soon as possible, can be huge, and just getting them to trust what you have to say.
and like building on that. So like certain, like you want a specific patient, but I guess we have multiple patients that this kind of stories have happened. So I can just speak generally and it's applied to a lot of people. But at like day one, that's you almost ask them like, hey, what are your expectations of physical therapy? How does this look to you? So you can kind of get an idea of where they're at. I don't know, with maybe their knowledge and like expertise of exercise and pain. But sorry. But building off of it, they like if you tell them, hey, look, we did more today, like you are probably going to be sore, or at least day one, like, hey, it's your first time exercising in a while, you're going to be sore, it is okay. Like just I jokingly say, like, hey, don't cuss me tomorrow when you wake up and getting on a toilet seat's a little hard. Because if you tell them that and they actually do start having that, they wake up with that soreness and maybe a little pain, they're actually not mad at you. You told them, they expected it, you delivered on what you said. Sorry, dogs are going crazy at the front and cats on the table again.
Guest experience. This is unexpected.
Yeah. But, and like, if I like telling what kind of what Chris was saying, we'll keep talking about building capacity and building like more resilience. I'll straight up tell them, look, we just did a little more than we could handle. And I always tell them in the beginning too, hey, just because we had a flare up, that's not a bad thing to me. That means we tested ourselves. If we never have a flare up, we never have a painful day or like a really sore day, then we probably never actually pushed you hard enough, and we're not going to get anywhere by doing that. So by setting the expectation and telling them, like, I always tell them, like, let's spin that bad experience of that painful day. Actually, I think that's more of a positive because we see where our limit is, and now we know maybe we try that in a week or two, we do it again, and it's a win for them. Like Chris was talking about, lifting 95 pounds off the ground. It's like, hey, I did like 60 leg extensions, body weight after surgery on week 2. My knee blew up. I feel like I couldn't walk for a week. Well, I did 60 2 weeks later, and I felt like I could have did 100 and been fine. And that's kind of another win for them. And like, all right, it's a good experience to kind of setting expectations and like delivering on them.
So do you end up seeing, so you guys mentioned people that are sort of resisting your guys' care. They don't want to be there initially because they might be seeking out other methods. Now, I don't know if Florida's this way because I'm from Michigan, but is Florida, you have to refer for PT, or are you guys able to get walk-in individuals and their insurance will take care of it?
So Florida is a direct access state. So legally in Florida, you can go to a physical therapist for 30 days before you need to go see a doctor, speaking pretty generally. There's a little more specifics to it. But where Chris is at, because where we work, we're technically affiliated with the hospital, Chris has direct access so that someone can walk in, go see him for 30 days, as long as the insurance allows for it too. That's usually kind of the thing if they're going to pay through insurance. For me, where I'm at, because we're affiliated with the hospital, we do not have our direct access set up. They keep saying it's coming soon, but my patients have to come from doctors right now. Chris's can come from doctors, or they can be basically a walk-in.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's more so that the patient was told by their doctor, hey, you're going to do physical therapy 2 times a week for 6 weeks. And the patient may feel that they're being just dropped off to the next thing. They might feel like their doctor's trying to push them out of the room. Other times they will agree with their doctor. And again, that's just something I ask them, like, hey, what do you think about this? I had an eval last week where the lady was saying like her doctor didn't even touch her, which, she's had both knees replaced and she's having this anterior hip pain. And the doctor touched her knees and then pushed on her hip and was like, oh, you don't need to get that replaced. Just go to physical therapy 2 times a week for 6 weeks. And so for me, that's a good place to make sure I actually ask her, like, hey, what do you think about, your care so far? That way I can know if does she think physical therapy is going to work, or does she think that was just the doctor's cop out to get them out of the office? In that particular instance, she was kind of up in the air, like, no, we'll see how it is. We'll see where it goes. And that's perfectly fine too. But to me, it's all about just being dynamic and knowing what your response is going to be. But you can only do that if you actually ask them about, what do they want. At the end of the day, I remind myself pretty frequently, this is meant to be patient-centered care. And the only way I can truly have patient-centered care is to actually ask them what they want and ask them what they expect. Just like my guy who didn't want physical therapy, that's fine. He's a farmer who moves stuff all day long. I think his physical activity is definitely meeting the standards. This lady, she was up in the air. So in that case, it was time to sell her on why physical therapy is going to be a benefit for her, and move from there. I will say I had recently a low back case of a guy who I treated a little while ago. He ended up discharging. His work schedule just changed completely, and he was doing pretty well. And then he had a huge flare-up in back pain. It was literally an acute incident. He was swinging a club really quickly, threw out his back. In his words, threw out his back. I would never say you threw out your back. But he went to an ER to get, medications, muscle relaxers, all that. And then normally in a common, typical, case of care, that person goes to the ER and then they say, hey, you should either go see an ortho or, never heard an ER referring someone to a chiropractor, but sometimes they might hear about their friend who has this one chiropractor. So it's very rare that we get that acute low back case walk into the clinic on their own. And I think in that instance, it's actually important to again, sell them on their favorable outcome and go from there. Because the typical course of care is, I'm going to go to a spine doctor. They're going to do imaging on me. We're going to see, the discs issues, and we might have a conversation about surgery depending on who your doctor is and what the findings are. And that's also why they're, and I know specifically in Australia, they're putting a lot more PTs in emergency rooms, because just the cost of care can be so much less, where a PT might say, okay, this looks and seems like just an acute case of low back pain with no major things that jump out at me that this needs to be handled by, a surgeon or anything like that. Let's take you down the PT route.
So one thing I always respect and love about you guys is, right, you guys were always able to communicate your point, or you weren't afraid to ask a lot of questions. I guess going back to PT school, because I was just listening to a podcast with Steffi Cohen and Tim Ferriss, and Steffi Cohen was asked, hey, why didn't you ever take your licenses exam and things of that nature? Why did you never go that route? She said a really crazy story in my eyes, that she did one of her clinicals. She did an eval, and she did everything by the book for school, and she had no idea what happened or no idea what was going on. And her, I guess, mentor at the time just said, just say something. So they are, I guess, at rest, or they have to come back. In a way, what is different from what you guys currently do now and what you guys were taught in school? Because I even see, in my opinion, I look at some individuals that try to go this fitness industry realm or route, and they don't really, their capability of communicating with people is bad. And it's at a point where if you ask a question that's supposed to be open-ended, they answer yes or no. So kind of give your 2 cents on that. Does school really teach you like this, or is it just you kind of being who you are and being experienced in the field that has allowed you to kind of be successful?
And once again, I think you kind of helped answer that with another question. So you're doing great. That's true, but school's great. I think it doesn't really matter where you end up going to school in the end. I think education, whether you're in high school, middle school, college, professional school, school is what you make of it. So given that, school is meant to help you pass the boards. They literally just care about you becoming a licensed, they care about you becoming a licensed physical therapist, getting through, they get their 3 years of tuition money. But in the end, I'd say USF actually did a good job of teaching things, especially the back pain. The professor we had was pretty big about, getting some of those biopsychosocial aspects. It's not necessarily just mechanical. There's a lot of other factors that can contribute to what's going on. But in terms of just communication, I think that's people in general, what's going to separate one person from the next. I mean, I don't think exercise wise, I feel like we all probably overcomplicate things and we try to make our way or this system we're using is better than the next person. But I mean, let's say like my person A and person B, does it really matter if you're like, if you have say a general 35-year-old mom who wants to work out, does it really matter if we give her the best program in the world, or we give her maybe, I guess we can compare two programs. We have the same programs, but Adam does a great job of communicating, like delivering. She has fun while she's there. But, working with Chris, I'll pick on Chris because we met, but that, like, Chris doesn't make it fun. Maybe Chris tries to like make her exercise the way that he wants to exercise, not necessarily the way she wants to go. She's not going to enjoy it much. She's not going to stick it out. So I just generally feel like if you can communicate, make them buy in, make them have a good time, that's the hard part. They call that like the soft skills, but that's what separates people. I think the majority of people are going to get better. I mean, we've seen a lot of research. We don't know a lot. A lot of things work, but if you just get them to buy into whatever you're doing, it's probably going to work. And I think that's where the communication and the individualization really like is going to take a hold of everything.
So
yeah, I definitely. Oh, good.
It's sort of along the similar lines, and it's from what people want, but what they need. Obviously, there's a fine line, and you can like use different coaching techniques to do certain exercises that, okay, like they much rather do a step up because it's not as hard on their quad as squats. But if you do a low box step up, like it's going to focus on the quads. But what about when someone wants to do something that's actually not going to provide them the benefits that they need? How do you guys handle that with physical therapy? For example, someone wants certain type of massage or manual therapies where really they need to do certain exercises in order to improve something like that.
So for me personally, there are two routes we can take. One is a little easier than the other. And this is just like the way my brain works. If someone has a very strong expectation for manual therapy to be helpful for them, then I will likely do it. And while I'm doing it, I'll explain to them my understanding of what's happening to the best of my knowledge. Before I do that, I'll ask them why they feel they're going to benefit from the manual therapy. If they give me an answer that involves some sort of like tissue manipulation or fixing joints or adjusting anything, then I will try to give them an evidence-backed, focused session of de-education while I'm doing my manual therapy with them, and then follow that up with, why it's likely is helping them, validating that, hey, this is helpful for you, and then further go into what we're going to do after, which will involve loading and things like that. The other option that you have, and I think it takes a bit more skill in terms of like communication skills, is to spend time to discuss with them and get them to understand why that may not be the best option for them, or why that likely is not the best option for them. And personally, I feel that I don't have the skill to take someone who's very heavily, I need manual therapy, and talk our way to get them to understand my point of view that is evidence-backed, without just completely losing them. There are PTs who are capable of doing that, and to me, that's awesome. That might be something I eventually try to get to, but in the meantime, like, manual therapies does have its benefits, and they're short-lasting, and the time it takes for me to perform it and get some buy-in from them is well worth it, in my opinion. Just like ice, let's say, like, for the most part, we don't recommend ice after an acute injury anymore. If I get done with a session with someone and they ask for ice for 10 minutes, I'll 100% give it to them, because the dose of ice that it takes to have negative effects on their healing is a lot more than 10 minutes. So I'm pretty much sacrificing nothing. They're getting something out of it. I can spare 10 minutes of time, or let them hang out for 10 extra minutes to feel better about it. Let's move on from there. So for the most part, yeah, I don't want to fit my treatment to the patient. I want to fit the patient to the treatment. and then slowly guide them towards what I have found in terms of the evidence, what will be most effective for them, which is always going to come down to some level of education and some level of exercise for the most part.
I'm pretty much same boat as Chris there. For example, Friday, I had a guy come in, and we get these PT scripts from the doctor, and it says Therex, and sometimes they check ultrasound, E-stem. I think sometimes the doctor's honestly just checking because it's on there. Well, the guy came in first time. We had he had a foot injury, no expectations of ultrasound or E-stem. I honestly didn't even notice it because I'm not gonna. I normally want to do all that. Well, he comes in on the second time, and he's like, "Hey, so are we going to do some of the ultrasound and stimulation?" And I was like, "Oh, were you wanting that?" He's like, "Well, yes, the doctor asked for it." And a lot of times people are going to put what the doctor says. I mean, they're putting them up on a pedestal, and what they say is gold. So I was like, "Well, honestly, ultrasound, I'm not going to spend the time to do. I don't feel it's going to be beneficial for you." I told him the latest research for his condition isn't like really backing it. But I met him. I said, "This, like the E-stem, I'm fine with doing that." Like Chris said, if he does basically the majority of things that I want him to do, we exercise for 45, 50, 60 minutes. I throw him on an E-stem for 10. That's not like really negatively affecting him. I also looked in, hey, I can look into getting you one of these units for home. Well, so now he can do it at home and not have to do it here. If his insurance company covers it, it's free. And I'm not necessarily trying to completely change his beliefs, but I'm also just not really reinforcing them either. That's kind of like what Chris saying. Some people, if they really want manual, yeah, I'll give them 5-10 minutes. And there's a lot of people love that. They're like, oh, they moved my shoulder around. They really stretched me out. In reality, I probably didn't push very, very far and create a real tissue length change, but they thought I did. And if that gets them to exercise for the next 60 minutes, then I'm not necessarily always going to fight them on it.
Yeah, and currently I've been in like a big mood of harping on things like quote unquote corrective exercises and things like that, where we're working on like the tiny muscles and things that, from what I've seen aren't going to have any major lasting changes. And to me, like if I got someone to squat or deadlift or push something to a capacity that is going to improve their fitness, I don't care what we do after. We can do whatever, abdominal hollowing, whatever you want to call it. Definitely not going to sell them on the narrative that, oh, we have these tiny muscles that aren't working correctly, and I felt with my hands that they're not working, so we're going to get them back up to speed. But if we want to do those exercises after we picked up a couple 100 pounds, sure, go for it. I don't care. And same thing with the patient. If they've heard that their core is weak, I'll spend time to explain to them why that's likely not the case. And if I can get them to pick up that 80-pound trap bar, and then after we want to do some ab exercises where they feel their abs working, sure, sounds good to me. That's fine. I just prioritize the things that will best fit the goals that they might have.
So I guess transition off of that to those tiny muscle exercises. You guys just recently made a post on warming up, and now that gyms are opening up from COVID, I think a lot of more people are going to the gym. So that's a really great thing. Something I still see is individuals doing all these rehab exercises, foam rolling for 10-15 minutes. I guess give our listeners an effective way to warm up, or why maybe foam rolling and things of that nature aren't actually priming your body for whatever exercises that you're about to do.
I know Chris just made the post, but it's funny you asked that question because I had a friend last night. We just had a phone conversation, and I called him because he texted me that exact question. Like, hey, how do you, what's the best way to warm up? And just generally speaking, I feel like we had this conversation also continued to this morning. If quote unquote experts, I feel like will never truly say they're experts. I feel like people who actually really know what they're talking about never give exact, oh yeah, this is the absolute best way to do that. Because you'll see that all over Instagram ads, Snapchat ads. basically, oh, this is the best exercise or the best warm up you can do to feel your body to prevent injury. And like kind of what we've talked on that post, that it is very individualized and it really does just depend. I'll kind of let Chris take it from there.
Yeah, well, like Adam, how do you warm up? What do you do?
So my warm up consists of walking 10 minutes on the treadmill and then, progressively overloading the weight I need to be.
Okay, so Adam does more than I do for a warm up. Obviously, it depends on what we're doing and what we're trying to get out of it. So if I'm squatting, I do 10 body weight squats holding onto the rack, and then I take the bar out and I try to do that 10 times. And if it feels good, I'll throw on 135 and start squatting. If the bar feels like crap, I'll take a minute, kind of shake my shoulders around, take the bar again. If that still doesn't feel great, I'll take the bar again. If I feel like, all right, I might feel a little better if I get some weight on here, I'll throw some plates on, and I'll just keep taking some weights and keep practicing my squat essentially. Because to me, squatting is going to get my heart rate up just fine. I'm going to eventually, I feel I can get into the position I want a little bit easier, a little bit better. And I want to take the time to do it. If I'm like warming up with Olympic lifts, then yeah, I do some like very specific drills to prepare me for certain positions that I'm trying to get into, or trying to coordinate a very specific movement pattern. Because I don't know if people realize this, but like lifting weights is pretty easy in terms of like the like motor demands of it, compared to like dancing or Olympic lifting or things like that. So I keep my brute lizard brain lifting stuff relatively simple and easy. But at the same time, if maybe someone wants to ride a bike for like 5 minutes, or they want to get their mind right, and do a 5-minute bike ride, go for it. If someone feels that they're severely restricted in their ankles before they squat, maybe I'll show you a 30-second way to get your ankles going and moving and work that in with your squat warm-up so you can actually try to transfer the skill over. Where I tend to get more specific with like warm-ups and things like that is going to be if we're dealing with someone who does experience pain to a certain degree. And that'll obviously be individualized as well. But, if my back hurts when I deadlift, maybe we're going to do some things that just get your tissue tolerance a little higher, or maybe we'll do some things that distract you from your back a little bit. Maybe we'll get your glutes burning really hard and immediately after go into some deadlifts and try to see if we can, slowly bump the weight up on the bar. But to me, the best warm-up is going to be the one that achieves our goal. So for me, when I'm squatting, my goal is to work up to a heavy single. I'm just going to squat a bunch. If for me, my goal for squatting was to get up to a heavy single without my shoulder hurting me, then maybe I'm going to squat and I'm going to add in some band pull-up parts rather than sit there for, 2 minutes scrolling through Instagram. But it's all context dependent on what it is that they might need, or what they feel they'll benefit from. If I have someone who like swears by foam rolling, maybe I'll discuss with them how 30 seconds of foam rolling is just as good as 5 minutes. And try to convince them that time spent might be better off practicing the lift or getting their mind right for their lift. And if they're still not buying it, then hey, I've done what I could. I've explained to them what I can. If they absolutely swear by 15 minutes of foam rolling, then I've given you the evidence behind it. But if you feel like that still doesn't do it enough for you, maybe I'll try to give you other options. But at the end of the day, like, I think that what they believe will help them the most is what's going to help them the most.
And at least the way I look at it, at least that guy's going to deadlift. Like it doesn't, I mean, I think in social media land, people get a little propped up like we need to throw them away, never use it, like blah, blah. But like, if he's going to put a 6 after that 10, 15 minutes, if he's going to go ahead and, deadlift, work out for an hour, great. Like if that's what he needs to do, I don't think Adam walking on the treadmill for 10 minutes is doing much for him. But if he goes from basically home, he wakes up, he goes home, walks for 10 minutes, maybe that's his like almost mental wake up of like, all right, well, all right, I'm here. Like I gotta get going now. That's
Yeah,
probably
watch
the
some
same thing
Pokemon.
yeah. I mean, some people need that.
I think the psychological side of, so you guys have been mentioning quite a few things, and it is in regards to your guys' therapy or the approach you guys take. Like, okay, if they want something like ice at the end, like you said, 10 minutes, 5 minutes of ice is probably not going to really stop you from progressing. So yeah, having them do that additional thing that they think is actually helping them might actually just boost them forward that much more because they think it's helping. So I'm a really big for just, if a person wants to do it, if it's not going to negatively impact them and they believe it's going to help them a ton, yeah, do it, just because the placebo effect is so unreal.
Yeah, and then eventually try to wean them off of it and explain to them why we don't need to build a dependence on this. Every time you play basketball, you don't need to put ice on your legs, and I need to get you to believe that sometime down the line, and maybe I'll taper you down 30 seconds at a time until we're doing such a small amount of time that it's just ridiculous. It's not even worth it anymore. But yeah, no, it's a lot of it's just all about the narrative that we're putting behind and the reasoning for what we're doing. But I think a lot of people fail to actually, do that part of things and explain the reasoning behind it. Like we're doing injury. I guess I wouldn't call it like injury screening, but it was just like full on assessments on combine athletes. And we're putting them through all these tests, and they're just, these athletes are used to just listening to what someone tells them and doing it because that's what they've been told to do. And they're working with the top people in the world. That's what they're going to do. For me, I was trying to put some context behind what they're doing. So they're doing like a single leg hamstring bridge for as many reps as possible. I tell them how there's some studies out there that showed if you can't get at least 25 of these, you're at a 50% increased risk of tearing your hamstring. You had some guys who were getting like 20 reps. They felt like, oh man, that was really tough. To me, it's just like, hey, awesome. We found something that you can probably benefit from working on. So at the same end of giving people what they want, I think it's also important to kind of flex on them a little bit, show them like, hey, I do know stuff, and the stuff I can give you can definitely be a benefit, especially when you get up to like the performance part of things. I think we tend to forget to explain to them like they're not just meathead athletes. A lot of people actually want to know why we're doing what we're doing, and that can push them even further ahead.
And I think a lot of it too, what you guys saying, even if it's not helping, that client or that patient feels that you're listening and they feel like you're caring for them. And like you were saying with the doctor, sometimes they didn't even touch them. Sometimes they don't even care. They see him for 2 minutes and it's like, hey, go away. I think we as trainers or therapists have a lot more, personability with our clients or patients. And that just allows for a lot more buy-in and just kind of building that rapport with them. So I guess to switch topics, guys, evidence-based movement, man, it's great. The content you guys put out, the research, the way you guys break it down and make it so simple to digest. Explain why'd you guys do it, or when was it started? Give us a little bit of background from it.
Yeah, so in 2016, a guy who I went to undergrad with, Madison Franick, he was up at school in Duke, and it was actually for an assignment that he had with some of his classmates. And so I guess for him, his assignment looked like creating some sort of Instagram account that looked at the things that we look at. And he knew that I was heavily involved in research at USF and things like that. So from that point on, it was just a lot of talking with him and discussing with him, what it will look like, what we're going to do with it, and what we were hoping to do. Initially at the time, I remember he was like, man, I just want to get like 10,000 followers. That'd be super cool. I want to put out something good. And then really we just had like a really solid plan that I felt like wasn't around on social media to the degree that we were wanting to do it. And then really it was just like following through with that plan and going forward. And then getting to a point where we saw like, hey, we like what we do. I think let's try to bump this up a level in terms of like what we're doing, how often we're posting, what we're talking about. And that's essentially what we did from that point on. And so it was around that time where we were trying to scale up what we were doing and how many posts we were making and what we were talking about, that Eric and Kyle came in and helped us out as well. Yeah.
Gotcha. So how, for, I guess, anybody out there that, wants to find specific research, is there any tips or tricks that you would give them to find certain topics that they're looking for? Because I feel like a lot of people, they struggle finding specific research or ways to find actual, evidence-based articles other than, something that's on bodybuilding.com. What are ways that help facilitate what you guys post?
I think a big part of it is finding other people who do talk about research and pull it up, similar to like what our page does, or even what you guys do. Even if it's just following someone who might reshare a story where someone covered a research article. I think that's a really good, easy way to just like break into exposure of it. I think most people don't know what they don't know. And it's not until you start to like dig into it that you start to really kind of snowball in from one article to the next. To me, someone who like has no experience in research at all, that's where they should start. From there, I would pay attention to like what types of journals you find are beneficial and you find that you end up coming back to over and over again. Maybe you just keep recognizing the name of that journal. And if you're like really trying to keep up with everything, I would try to visit that journal, once a month, just scroll through what they have going on through there and moving from there. Along with that, I think it's good to learn how to effectively use like Google. Like to me, it's really easy to look up, a blog article, and if you're lucky, that blog article was written by someone who is going to cite research and discuss it and use evidence. And if you can catch on to something like that, definitely use that and use those references. But if not, like the easiest thing in the world for me is when I'm trying to be like very basic, I know nothing about this topic, I just type in what I don't know, and then I type in NCBI, and that'll pretty much always give me, whatever PubMed article there is on that specific topic. But even in like our research class, they'd always talk about how they wanted us to like go through the school library to find these articles and things like that. I was just like, probably too like idiotically prideful to do that. And I just kept using Google search with NCBI at the end. And I found that just really helpful and easy and basic, on a low level of just getting into things again. We all know how to use Google pretty easily. And Google doesn't always give us, it's almost always going to give us some sort of like blog article first. So just typing in NCBI to what you don't know can take you down some interesting rabbit holes.
And usually when you click on one study, it's like on a computer, at least on the sidebar, it shows related articles, or people may have also read this or searched this. So you can quickly find a bunch of, related papers pretty quickly. That's just surface level. And then I think you eventually have to get into like learning how to analyze the data, which is something that Chris is good at. I mean, this happens too often with AVM, is that we find a study, it looks great. And then sometimes some studies that get published all the time, they're not necessarily great. And you look back and they look at the raw data and it's like, they don't actually have any raw data, or like, where did they get this number from? And sometimes with the journals, they don't actually share all of it. They share tables, and then somebody have to look like in an appendix or something to find it and scavenge through it. But not everyone is always willing to go that far. They'll read the abstract and say, oh yeah, this exercise increased sprint speed. But you go back, look at the data, and it's like, well, yeah, it was statistically significant, but maybe actually really isn't like practically or clinically significant. Or Chris, what we always bring up, if good rule of thumb is if the confidence interval crosses, if it like crosses 0, then that's basically negligible.
Yeah, so I know one tool for me that changed my life was literally just setting up alerts on PubMed or Google Scholar saying, hey, if the word hypertrophy or something like that comes up, I got a notification for that article. And then literally Sci-Hub, man. Sci-Hub changed my life.
Oh,
I used to get
We're allowed to say that on here?
I think we are. I used to get so heated not being able to find an article or going through the long process through the school. But no, that's great information, because I still think even in my master's degree, there's a lot of individuals that still struggle with hey, where do I start? Or I know with Sydney and all of her like classmates are like, hey, how do you find this, this, and this? I'm like, one, use Google. And then two, have you guys ever heard of PubMed? And they're like, what? PubMed? I'm like, oh my. So it's kind of crazy.
The amount of, like, kind of when you brought up the warm-up question, like some of the experts and people who actually give you a good answer, there's a lot of BS out there in the world. And I'm very quick to not necessarily like maybe give an opinion on something, but I feel like once you learn enough, you have like a BS meter that starts to tick when people say certain things. You're like, I don't know necessarily. I think there's some truth into what he or she is saying, but I don't know if I would really phrase it that way. Maybe they're oversimplifying it. That's one thing I think is the benefit of knowing more research is like, well, hey, like I have a decent understanding of science. Like that doesn't make 100% sense to me. I don't like necessarily agree with what they're saying here.
There's definitely a couple like keywords that like raise my blood pressure more than it should.
What, like throwing the back out?
Oh yeah, throwing my back out, corrective exercises. Oh man, like oh gosh, messes me up a little too much. Like to the point where I'm like, all right, I need to really calm down. No, but Adam, when you're talking about the PubMed keywords, I have a friend who he typed in ATP as a keyword. And the next day he had like 2,500 emails in his inbox just from one day.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so be very selective with your keywords, but no, it's definitely a solid tool.
So I think we're approaching an hour. I don't want to keep you guys much longer, but I want to touch on what you guys are currently focusing on at EBM, where you guys hope to expand or look further into in the future, what you guys want to get into, and where can people find you or seek out your help?
Yeah, so personally, I think that most students and even a lot of clinicians who've been working for a while don't feel so confident about exercise prescription. I think that it's definitely something that's glossed over by school, at least in my experience, but then also just from what I've heard from other students, they just don't feel prepared for it. And I feel having some sort of grasp in strength conditioning and things like that can take you a long way. But I do think that, there is a PT side of things, and that there's a good way to view exercise prescription. And so that's something that I'm trying to get big into and trying to essentially build a course for, and make it like very affordable for students, and then maybe a little less affordable for clinicians who have paying salaries, even though we all have student loans anyways. But I think that that's something that we can definitely benefit more from. And if movement and exercise is the focus of our profession, I think we need to spend more time on learning the nuances of that rather than maybe going to like a 48-hour manual therapy course. So that's something I'm definitely trying to like break into. But beyond that, it's really just kind of keeping the train rolling. I think more than anything, that's what we've been doing, is just keep trucking along, and keep reading more. And I would say in the last like 2 years, we've had more people challenge what we have to say than we've ever had before, which to me, that's a great thing. That tells us that, hey, people are like on point with this stuff, which means we have to also be on point with it. And really, there's a lot of times where we have to listen to what other people have to say and get their perspective on it. Because, as things move along, people are having a better expertise than even we do on a lot of things. And that's an awesome opportunity to kind of level up with them. So personally, that's where I'm trying to get to with this. Where are you, Eric?
It's been a fun experience so far. I mean, you've learned, even like, essentially the way it's structured is like we all essentially take a week. Chris does basically like the other post when we have like a research study we review. We all take a week, and it's honestly just been a ton of fun and learning experience to look at all these cool like cool studies that are done. I mean, it's a research study, 1 to 2 every single week that we review, and then multiple during the week. So it's just great to be able to keep up with, the literature and stay up to date, and also have people challenge us, which is awesome because it really does keep you on your toes. We actually had an author of a paper, our PT school. I think we essentially misworded something. It wasn't like maliciously we tried to but we ended up saying does not instead of do or something, to almost refute what the paper was saying. But so the author ended up reaching out, hey, I wrote this, that's not what this found or something. So it's kind of cool. But I'm always looking to, just better myself with personal side of things. It's awesome through EBM we get to access, get to come on podcasts like this. So actually someone else asked us to be on a baseball oriented one, which is something I'm always trying to stay passionate about and stay involved in, and use this PT and CSCS strength conditioning side of things to help just continue some involvement in the game whatsoever. And that's kind of where I'm at.
Perfect. So where can everyone find you guys? Personal accounts, evidence-based movements accounts, or any other social media platform that you guys are on?
Yeah, so you can find us at EBM. You can find my dog at EBM as well. If you ever see any pictures, say hi to her.
And that's at evidence-based MVMT on Instagram. It's not movement spelled out. It's MVMT, or you just search evidence-based movement. We should be on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of dog pictures too.
We need some more cat photos, to be honest. Eric's cat popped up.
Not a damn chance. Sorry, Eric. And then I'm at the Strength Guy on my personal account.
Spell guy out.
Oh yeah, sorry, GAI.
Pronounced gay in some circles, but it just depends on what part of the country you're in. And then I'm just at Eric _Schindler 31, like Schindler's List. So at Eric _Schindler 31.
All right, and before we go, Chris, favorite Pokemon generation?
I'm gonna throw everyone off and say Gen 2 Johto League by far, because they throw in all the Gen 1s, but then Gen 2 is just the perfect add-on. Sorry, boys.
Eric, I know you may not know, but
Eric, say something.
I played Pokemon on the Game Boy growing up. I hit it hard when I was that age, but I haven't seen it since then.
Eric, who is your starter?
Oh, this tells you a lot about something.
If you don't know, just tell me. If you don't know, just tell me the color.
No, but I feel like I would rotate. I would like work up to Charizard
who's your
or
favorite?
Blastoise.
Yeah, come on. We're trying to learn about you here.
The go-to.
I don't even know. I can't have a favorite.
No.
Oh my gosh.
No.
You're all right. No, you're just Team Rocket. That's all we know from now.
That works for
All
me.
right, guys. No, we really appreciate y'all. Obviously, you guys are the first guests that we've had on all the smoke strength and conditioning or strength and physique. Damn, I already messed it up, but right.
We can talk about
so we
Eric's
appreciate
physique.
it. So we'll definitely, obviously, hopefully we'll be able to do a part 2, man, because I always love you guys, love what you guys do and what you guys are about. But yeah, man, appreciate you guys coming on. Chris, you have anything else?
No, it was a pleasure to finally meet you guys. I've been waiting for this. You guys have some really good information over at EBM, and I always love looking at your guys' information. And I just realized right before this podcast, I follow like everything EBM except for you two individually. And I'm like, okay, this is
hurtful. It's okay.
I know, right? I support what you guys support. So
yeah.
Hey, actually, now before we can probably cut this off though, but straight up, because I've been listening to all the smoke basketball stuff, and the last question they always ask to their guests: who should we have on? Like, if you guys wanted to listen to somebody on our podcast as a guest host, who would you want to listen to? Give me 3 people, and I'll hopefully try to make it happen.
I'm gonna go. My first one off the top of my head is Karina. I think it'd be great to have her on there. I think you look for special topics and interests. So I feel like you go maybe like nutrition side of things with her. I think she has a wealth of information to offer. She's my first resource if I ever have a question. Because that bullshit meter goes off, someone says something, I'm like, Karina, what's up with this? And she's like, actually, that's not that bad. That's okay. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah. I definitely say Nina, and then if you can get him, a friend of ours, Adam. Whoa, not Adam. Adam, you are my friend. Sorry, I love you. Andrew.
Oh yeah.
Andrew Kutnick. He's like the coolest dude ever. Like brilliant man. He did his PhD at USF in Dr. D'Agostino's lab. And he does.
The dude that's diabetic and killed that.
Yeah, who crushed us on the road bike challenge.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll talk to you forever. But he just has like amazing stuff to do. Just have.
He wears a mouthpiece working out because I think he grits his teeth so hard.
Yeah.
Oh, he's hardcore. He's in the
you know. Yeah, Koutnick maybe.
Okay. Send me his information if you don't mind, Chris.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, he's an amazing resource, just in the research world in general.
He gave a great keto lecture he gave to us was awesome.
Yeah, no, for sure. He's big in that space. And then who would our third one be? I mean, like Dr. Campbell's always amazing, but you already know that.
Yeah, I plan on getting Campbell and hopefully Buckner on it eventually.
Yeah, Buckner. I love my friend Ryan Calhoun. He started the powerlifting team with me back in the day, and he kind of like got me started with all the research stuff.
You should try to get Andreas on.
Andres Vargas, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't he do?
Andreas went to USF, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's the study I got hurt in.
And is he coaching with the Tigers now?
No, he does his own private thing. But then also we have Danny Bove, who he coaches with the Pelicans now, or not. He doesn't coach. He's the sports scientist for the Pelicans. And then my other friend, what's that?
Is Danny that redhead or no? Am I tripping?
No, you're definitely tripping.
Okay. Who's the scary dude who listened to literally hell music? That's Daniel, right?
Oh yeah, that's Daniel Sayers. He's in politics now. Yeah.
If you want something interesting, have him on.
But then also, I don't know if you ever met Jeff Dolan.
I never have.
He's
in the Suns right now, right?
Yeah, he's with the Suns. Him and Danny were both.
He's got some experience because he was with the Yankees for a little bit too.
Yeah, I remember him.
He was with the Yankees. He just has some crazy life experience because his first degree was in history. And then he went on to try to become a pro triathlete. And then he somehow got involved in Westside Barbell stuff and like powerlifting. And then worked with like Notre Dame. He's like, him and Danny are some of the most interesting people in the world when you talk to them. But
cool.
Yeah, those are some top peeps for sure.
Perfect. We'll hopefully reach out to him, and then if I need information, I'll definitely come back to you guys for it. But yeah, I appreciate you guys.
Or you could just use Google, as that was like a key thing mentioned.
Yeah, dude. Google NCD.
Shit. So Adam, I have a friend who just started a podcast. I was talking to him, and he was saying if people are always like, he was looking at his perspective. Like he's like, people are always looking for guests. Like you can just ask them, like, hey, can I come on your podcast? And most of the time people are like, well, yeah, actually, we need a guest to come on. So I wouldn't even mind I feel like just be ballsy and just not like ballsy, but it's Instagram. Just message someone like, hey, start a podcast, strength conditioning. Would you be interested? Maybe not like go to super big fish, but some of the people you follow, just shoot for them. Be like, if they say no, they say no.
Even like the big fish, I guarantee you'll reach out. Cause like I've reached out to people that I would have never have thought for like an internship before. And they're like, within an hour they respond. They're like, yeah, like
free labor. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Exactly. We'll have you work for free.
Yeah.
Come tonight.
Yeah. All right.
I agree.
So I appreciate it a ton, guys. It was great talking to you guys, getting to know you guys more. And I appreciate you guys for helping us out and sharing some great information.
Yeah, no, anytime. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
See y'all. Appreciate you guys.
Take it easy, guys.
You guys take care. Bye, everyone.